Now, I mentioned there were two halves of this mentally healthy prerequisite, or this prerequisite of a mentally healthy religion. I said that a mentally healthy religion is one that helps people move from a sense of guilt to forgiveness. And, notice, provides well-defined, significant ethical guidelines instead of ethical trivia. There is no doubt about it, as you read through the Bible, and in the New Testament particularly, but not exclusively, that there are significant ethical guidelines set down for the Christians, the Christians, the followers of Christ. There is no indication in the Bible that the Holy Spirit, the glorious bounty of a Christ-purchased redemption and religion, will take the place of the law of God. The law of God is there in all its clarity. It's in the imperative, we say. It's in the command. It's in the clear direction. In other words, in the New Testament we have indicative, the is, and we have imperative, the ought. And the is and the ought go beautifully together in the New Testament. The ought flows out of the is. In other words, the ought or the law or the imperative here is a glorious, spontaneous result of trust in the forgiveness of sins in Jesus Christ alone. It's there in the New Testament. This type of modern-day teaching that the Holy Spirit takes the place of the law and that the Holy Spirit will somehow sit on your shoulder and whisper all sorts of directives into your ear is just not biblical religion. It's fantasy. There is no spirit ethic in the Bible. There are significant, clear, ethical guidelines laid down in the Bible. But I want to say something else that is very important here, I believe, and that is this. There are not too many of them. I want to say that again. In the Bible you have provided well-defined, significant ethical guidelines, but not too many of them. May I say that one of the criteria that I use to adjudicate the worthwhileness or otherwise of certain creeds in the history of the Christian church is the detail into which they go for those who are to subscribe to them. Some creeds say too much. And some ethical injunctions are too many. Now, this is a fact that I ask you to consider. You look into the New Testament, look into the epistles, and what you will see there is significant ethical guidelines, but they do not ever delve into trivia, into little itsy-bitsy little things that believers are supposed to do and not to do. I challenge you to consider this. When you look into the epistles, you see ethical guidelines, for instance, about families, about the relation of husband and wife, about the relation of children to fathers, parents to children, and the relation of employees to employers, slaves to masters, etc., Christians to the state. But you do not find itsy-bitsy little sort of microscopic sort of detail. You know, the small italicized print in some insurance policies. You do not find that. And I suspect that it's for a very important reason that you do not find that. This is because I believe there are certain things which are ethical givens in every situation in life. In other words, there are things of universal applicability. But there are other things which are not of universal applicability, but things which relate to a particular person in a particular life situation in which that person happens to be at that particular time. And the Bible would end up like the Encyclopedia Britannica if it was to try to cover all those situations. And not only that, there would be very little room left for intelligent exercise of one's faculties in the walk of faith amongst Christians. I want to say that we ought to be very careful about microscopic delineation of what Christians ought to do in this and that situation, so that it almost gets back to medieval scholastic handbooks. You know, you just whip out the big volume, look up the particular alphabetical number. Now let's see, piety in this situation, P, P, P-A, P-A, P-A-E, P-I. Right, here it is. That becomes a very stultified, a very inhibited, a very sort of hedged-in type of religion and type of mentality. And it's not in keeping with the freedom of Christian existence. We ought to be very careful about pontificating on what Christians should do in this and that particular situation. In other words, there is no room left at all for the plurality of existences that go to make up the Church of God, the socio-cultural differing contexts that are obviously part and parcel of our world. And I believe that one of the things that has led to a hedged-in, restricted type of religion is this attempt to cover every aspect of another person's existence with a rule and a regulation as to what he should or should not do. And it's striking to me how that so many of these bubble bath type Christians will be always going on about this and that, and yet the very major significant areas that are set down in the Bible are oftentimes quite neglected. I know many, well, I'll qualify that. It's easy to overstate the case there. But I certainly know some major charismatic leaders are all over the earth like the frogs of Egypt, performing all sorts of miracles, and their homes almost in absolute chaos.